You might think pirates spent their time swaggering on deck, waving cutlasses, and singing sea shanties while counting piles of glittering gold. But their biggest enemy wasn't rival crews or the Royal Navy. It was something far more mundane and annoying, making that stolen gold actually usable in the legal economy. Yeah, turns out the real gold rush involved some pretty wild attempts to turn ill-gotten treasure into coins and bills nobody would refuse, without getting arrested or keel-hauled. Let me tell you something crazy about how pirates laundered stolen gold into legal money. It's part crime thriller, part medieval banking, and part straight-up mad science. Now, before you imagine pirates secretly dropping bags of gold coins at banks with a polite, "Here's some cash, no funny business," think again. The problem was, gold obtained from plunder was as hot as the Caribbean sun in July. Local authorities hated pirates, so if you showed up anywhere with suspiciously shiny new booty, you'd find yourself in irons faster than you can say, "walk the plank." That meant pirates had to get creative, not just about stealing gold, but about making it look like it came from somewhere else, somewhere legit. The catch? Pirates didn't have offshore accounts, cryptocurrency wallets, or international money transfer apps. They had gunpowder, rum, and a distinct lack of accountants. So how did a bunch of rum-soaked swashbucklers turn stolen treasures into spending cash? First, they faced the classic problem. Gold coins freshly looted often bore marks linking them to their original owners, or were just too obviously fresh and flashy to pass for normal money in port towns. "Oh, you suddenly have 200 gold ducats. That's suspicious," said every customs officer ever. Plus, some coins were old, rare, or minted in distant countries, hard to exchange unless you found the right shady dealer who wouldn't ask too many questions. Now, talking numbers. A typical pirate crew in the Golden Age numbered around 50 to 100 men. A single raid could net them anywhere from 500 to 2,000 gold coins, weighing in at around 15 to 60 pounds of solid, shiny metal. You don't just scatter that around like confetti at a party. Someone's going to notice, and it better not be the wrong someone. Bad idea number one, melting the gold on their ships. Pirates tried tossing coins into fires hoping to recast them into bars or ingots that looked less traceable. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. First, ship fires are terrifying, and anything that could melt gold also meant the whole ship risked burning down. Second, melting down coins with unfamiliar impurities sometimes made the metal brittle or discolored. And since gold's purity difference isn't huge but matters a lot in the trade, any weird metal look was like a neon sign reading, "This treasure is pirate booty." Let's just say the crew was less than thrilled when they had to scrap a half-melted lump of metal that looked like a melted pancake instead of a bar. Here's where it gets interesting. Pirates figured out that instead of trying to forge new gold, the real genius was turning physical gold into other forms of wealth or disguising it within legitimate trade goods. Think of it like a medieval version of money laundering, but without banks or fancy shell corporations. More like gold smuggling meets barter system. One of the sneakiest tricks involved using trusted middlemen, merchants and fence operators. In port cities like Port Royal in Jamaica or Nassau in the Bahamas, notorious pirate hangouts. These middlemen would take dirty gold from pirates, then trade or sell it in legitimate markets, returning an agreed portion back as clean currency or goods. We're talking about 17th century black market economics here, where a pirate's share of loot would get parked temporarily in somebody else's hands that had a less suspicious name and better papers. Pirates could then buy supplies, pay their men, or even bribe local officials without flashing piles of outlaw treasure. But guess what? Relying too heavily on fences came with massive headaches. These middlemen had notorious reputations for skimming the best coins or simply running off to France with pirate loot. Sometimes it took weeks, even months, to get any clean money back, and pirates, being notoriously impatient and quick-tempered, sometimes resorted to very awkward interrogations involving cannon butts and wooden planks. One legendary example is the infamous Captain Henry Morgan, who after his raids in Panama in the 1670s, supposedly used a network of trusted merchants in Jamaica to offload his treasure. But even Morgan had to wait months, his men grumbling and threatening mutiny over delayed booty payments, because the cleaning process wasn't exactly instant. So pirates mixed hard cash smuggling with a little more subtlety. They dipped their toes into something like early money laundering through commodity trading. Instead of moving gold directly, they swapped it for high-value goods that looked totally legitimate and easy to sell. Things like sugar, spices, tobacco, or even captured slaves. These goods had a legal trade route, so pirates cleverly funneled their value through existing markets where record keepers weren't too curious about how the goods arrived on ships. Here's where it gets wild. Pirates often disguised gold as something less conspicuous, a large shipment of iron nails or even gunpowder barrels filled with coins hidden inside. If customs officers caught the shipment, they didn't have to question the contents as thoroughly because the labeled goods were so mundane. This method wasn't perfect, though. Concealing gold inside barrels that were supposed to be filled with gunpowder sometimes led to catastrophic consequences. Imagine accidentally dropping a barrel of coins onto a spark and turning your loot in the ship into a big fireball. Not exactly an ideal heist exit strategy. Science fact time. Pirates didn't realize it, but hiding the gold inside dense goods like gunpowder or iron nails was actually a clever way to mask the metal's density from casual inspection. Gold is extremely dense. It weighs almost 20 times as much as water, so a barrel of gold coins would feel suspiciously heavy compared to its size if easily handled. By mixing or hiding it in heavy but innocent cargo, pirates tricked the human intuition that heavier means suspicious gold. It's basically a 17th century version of putting cash inside daily groceries to evade detection in airport security. Another fiasco involves a lesser-known pirate captain, Robert Culliford, who tried hiding coins inside wooden balls shaped like cannonballs, hoping to fool customs officials. Bad idea. Really bad idea. The wooden cannonballs were lighter than real ones, and when tested by soldiers, the discrepancy was obvious. Culliford's stash was discovered, leading to a month-long siege by local authorities who wanted the loot back in. A talk with Culliford about why deception isn't a great career choice. So, when direct gold smuggling and commodity disguise failed or took too long, pirates embraced yet another method, converting gold into foreign currency with less traceable origin. This was the original version of currency swapping, turning suspect Spanish doubloons into Dutch guilders or English pounds through underground exchange networks. These networks existed even back then, trading foreign coins at fluctuating rates based on demand and suspicion levels. It was basically an illegal currency exchange booth staffed by shady dealers with dark alley shopfronts. To put numbers on it, the exchange rate for a Spanish doubloon to a Dutch guilder could vary by around 5 to 10% depending on how suspicious or new the coins looked. A seemingly small loss for pirates, but worth avoiding arrest. Some historic records hint that these underground currency exchangers managed to turn about 70% of pirate booty into usable wealth after all the fees and risks. Pretty good for a bunch of thieves, without a formal banking license. Here's the irony. Because currency exchange rates weren't standardized, pirates often relied on a mix of rumors, contacts, and bluffing to get the best rates. Ill-informed pirates could easily get cheated, exchanging 200 gold coins worth 100 for a sack of brittle copper pennies worth 20. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation with your own crew. The wildest twist. Pirates often had to bribe or buy off local officials and money changers just to avoid legal trouble during these exchanges. Not exactly the glamorous life of freedom the pirate legend tells us. Instead, it was a cycle of paying off the law to basically forget where the gold came from, then buying back supplies and safe passage around the Caribbean. Of course, with all these complicated schemes, pirates had to keep meticulous track of loot shares to make sure everyone got their cut, especially when the haul was washed through 50 shady networks across 3 different islands. The Pirate Code, those famous rules that weren't just about fighting but also about loot division, had clauses about how long you could wait to get your share and what to do if someone cleaning the money turned out to be a thief themselves. To sum up so far, pirates faced a maddening puzzle, turning freshly stolen, hot gold into something that could be spent without instant arrest. They tried everything from melting coins on board to hiding gold in barrels of gunpowder, smuggling via commodity trades, and underground currency swaps. Many attempts failed spectacularly, involving explosions, betrayals, and angry crews ready to mutiny. The ones who succeeded relied on a mix of patience, trusted middlemen, clever disguise, and sometimes pure dumb luck. The coolest part, in trying to launder gold, pirates stumbled onto techniques that resemble some of today's financial tricks, just with more rum and fewer spreadsheets. Their version of financial ingenuity may have lacked compliance officers but made up for it in dramatic flair and near-mad desperation. But hold tight, because the story doesn't end here. Next up, we'll dive into the even crazier, weirder methods pirates used to flip their ill-gotten gains into legal tender, including some involving fake passports, secret letters, and even the world's first pirate bank. And trust me, that part is stranger than any sea monster tale you've heard. So, picking up where we left off, pirates had all these wild ways to turn stolen gold into spendable cash, but the story gets even crazier when you realize they also had to deal with something way less shiny but far more deadly: trust. Yeah, you heard that right. Pirates are famous for backstabbing and rum-fueled mutinies. So handing over a bundle of gold to some shady merchant and hoping for the best, that was a full-on gamble, like juggling flaming knives blindfolded while a pelican poops on your head. Not exactly a solid financial strategy. So how did they manage to pull off these sketchy deals without turning their crew into a bunch of naval biscuits tossed overboard? Here's the kicker. Pirates developed an unofficial but surprisingly effective system of trust building based on something we'd call reputation collateral. Unlike today's boring credit scores or bank guarantees, pirate reputations were earned by keeping your word under threat of violence or public shame. If a middleman ran off with the loot or shortchanged the crew, word spread fast, and that traitor was marked as persona non grata with a very public and often violent blacklist. So merchants and fences had a strong incentive to deliver because losing pirate trust meant losing business, and possibly waking up with a cutlass where your toes used to be. This brutal accountability system, humane and diplomatic, nah, definitely not, but effective enough for the cutthroat pirate economy. Now, that wasn't the only tricky bit. Pirates also had to deal with, or sometimes exploit, the murky government officials who controlled the Caribbean ports. Some governors and customs agents were outright corrupt, basically working as part-time pirate accountants in exchange for bags of gold and fancy rum. These officials could legalize stolen gold by turning a blind eye to questionable shipments, stamping official papers, or even selling pirate shares under fake names to real investors. Ever wonder why certain colonial governors got knighted for services to the crown? Hint, bribes disguised as showy gifts had a lot to do with it. It was basically the 17th century version of pay to play, but with more pistols and fewer spreadsheets. Next up in the pirate laundering toolkit was a surprisingly sophisticated postal trick involving something called secret letters, or coded correspondence. Pirates and their partners developed a form of primitive encrypted messaging, a clever system of letters that looked innocent but contained hidden instructions about where to drop off their loot, who could be trusted, or when the gold had been successfully cleaned. Believe it or not, these secret letters helped pirate crews coordinate with faraway contacts in Europe and the Americas to convert stolen treasure into legal investments or goods that could be sold overseas without raising suspicion. Basically, think of it as pirate Twitter, but slower and with worse handwriting. One famous example involves the notorious pirate Black Bart Roberts in the early 1720s, who reportedly used coded letters sent from pirate-friendly ports in the West Indies to safely direct shipments of plundered Spanish gold into legitimate Dutch markets. These messages sometimes included silly-sounding phrases like, "The parrots fly at midnight," which actually meant gold shipment arriving on the third day. Don't ask me why parrots, but hey, pirates loved their birds almost as much as they loved gold. It's a testament to their shrewdness. Talk about turning a well-inked quill into a weapon of economic warfare. And then there's the concept you probably hadn't heard before, the world's very first pirate bank. I'm serious. It sounds like the setup for a bad joke, but by the early 18th century, pirate-friendly ports, like Nassau, had institutions that functioned surprisingly like banks, serving as escrow accounts and investment hubs for pirate loot. These informal banks offered to hold treasure in exchange for a fee, delaying payouts until the gold could be safely moved or converted into land, ships, or legitimate business ventures. Talk about creative wealth management for a bunch of sea rats. It was basically the Cayman Islands of its day, minus the beaches and plus a lot more muskets. The scandalous part: these pirate banks weren't exactly strict on paperwork, and lots of pirate captains ended up at the losing end of shady deals, forgetting whose booty was whose. This led to dramatic courtroom showdowns and occasional fistfights right in the middle of Nassau's sleepy taverns, sometimes spilling over into full-blown riots. One famous case involved Captain Charles Vane, who accused a pirate bank manager of embezzling his share, leading to public brawls and a good chunk of the island's population choosing sides like a bad reality TV show. Good times, good times. On the science-wise side of things, pirates stumbled upon some accidental metallurgical tricks when they tried to age fresh coins to make them look less suspicious. Bad idea number 247. Rubbing new gold coins in mud or salt water to give them a used look. Spoiler alert, it didn't work out as planned. Sometimes the coins would end up with weird discolorations or corrosion that actually made customs officers more suspicious. But here's the twist. Pirates discovered that just lightly rubbing coins with certain oils or using abrasive cloth could dull their shiny newness without damaging the details. It's basically the 17th century version of distressed jeans for gold coins. Turns out, subtle changes to surface reflectivity made the coins pass muster more often than blasting them in fire or soaking them in swamp water. Let me tell you about Captain Anne Bonny, who, legend has it, had her treasure temporarily turned into jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, even belt buckles, where the gold was disguised as fashion accessories. These could be sold in town as legitimate luxury goods without raising suspicion. Not only did this disguise make it harder for customs to trace the gold back to pirate raids, but it also gave the crew a little swagger boost. Rumor has it that her men would blink twice if you asked where all the gold went, then casually flash a shiny buckle or two. Clever and stylish, a lethal combo in pirate circles. Speaking of disguise, pirates didn't limit themselves to hiding gold in goods or disguising it as jewelry. Some went full-on Quidditch and used false bottoms in barrels or hollowed-out wooden planks to stash coins. The trick here was to hide the gold in places only trusted crew members knew about, avoiding nosy dockworkers and patrols. But bad idea alert. Secrecy works until someone forgets where the secret cache is, or worse, the barrel gets swapped during loading. You can probably guess how that ended. Lost treasure and lots of questions at the next dockside tavern. Now, let's talk numbers. The typical crew on a decent-sized pirate vessel like the Royal Fortune could be upwards of 70 to 100 men, so that loot division was seriously complicated. Each pirate's cut could be anywhere from 20 to 100 gold coins depending on rank, loot size, and, let's be honest, who was grumpier that day? Managing all these shares, especially when the treasure wasn't yet clean money, was a logistical nightmare requiring pirate quartermasters to keep intense records, sometimes drawing up charts on battered wood tablets. Yes, pirates had their version of Excel sheets, just more blood and rum stains and half the legibility. By the way, speaking of blood, the stakes were high. If a quartermaster got caught cheating or fudging the numbers, the punishment wasn't a boardroom firing. It was often a public flogging or a ballot vote to see if you got thrown overboard. So yes, accountability was brutal but brutally effective. It's like a bad HR department run by angry barbarians. There was also a surprisingly widespread practice of pirates investing their cleaned loot into legitimate businesses on land. Some transitioned into plantation owners, tavern keepers, or maritime traders, using their converted wealth to build solid financial foundations away from the high seas. This was pirate capitalism in its rawest form, turning dead men's chests into real estate and rental income. Captain Henry Jennings, for example, after a successful career in the Caribbean, invested his haul into Jamaican sugar plantations, blending into society and securing steady income while keeping some rum-soaked pirate tales for the tavern. The irony: his legal veneer outlasted many royal governors. But there's a dark side to all this muddy gold math. The laundering process was slow, sometimes taking months or even years before gold was clean enough to be used openly. During this limbo, crews often grew restless and mutinous. If pirate captains failed to deliver timely payments, you'd get famous fights and votes to depose leaders, sometimes on the spot between rum shots and cannon fire. Imagine the chaos trying to calm 100 angry pirate drunks yelling about their missing ducats. AG doesn't even begin to cover it. And let's not forget that much of the laundered gold ended up fueling corrupt colonial economies. Some historians argue that pirate laundering destabilized Caribbean trade markets, muddying price standards and tipping off inflation in port towns. So, ironically, pirates were the original disruptive fintech entrepreneurs, except their disruption included burning ships and pillaging villages. Talk about unintended economic consequences. So what's the takeaway here? Pirates didn't just swing swords and steal shiny stuff. They hacked the 17th century financial system with a mix of cunning, violence, and gut-wrenching patience. Their laundering methods combined smuggling, barter, coded communication, corrupt collaborators, and even proto-banking to make stolen gold flow into legal markets. It was part intelligence operation, part burglary, and part slapstick comedy of errors involving muddy coins, fake letters, and angry mutineers threatening to toss each other to the sharks. And while the image of the pirate might forever be tied to swashbuckling and jackdaws perched on shoulders, behind the scenes, these sea thieves were some of the most creative financial engineers of their time. Their version of money laundering was messy, risky, and often explosive, but it worked well enough to keep the legend of pirate treasure alive for centuries. So when next time you think of pirates, forget about the shiny tricorn hats and peg legs for a second and imagine gold coins sneaking through barrels of gunpowder, coded letters fluttering in the breeze, and back alley deals sealed with a fistfight or a flask of rum. Because that's the real magic trick pirates had to master to survive. And honestly, it's a little inspiring to know that even the world's most notorious outlaws had to deal with the headache of dirty money, just like us.